Hey everybody, welcome to this week's podcast. No special announcements or anything, so I'm just going to jump right into it. First up, a new Neo Geo arcade machine was just announced, and there's not too much info on it. There's a ton of people speculating, but I'll tell what there is so far, and there's definitely some concerns. So it's called the Neo Geo MVSx, and it's either comes as a tabletop or a stand-up unit, and there's no pre-orders yet, although it says the release date will be October of this year. It's $500 if you want the full stand-up set that looks to be about the size of an arcade one-up, like a three-quarter style arcade machine. Or if you want just the top, it's $450, but if you're going to buy the stand afterwards, it's $100 for the stand, so it makes sense to pick it up as one piece if you have the room. It's got a 17-inch 1280 by 1024 LCD panel, so it is going to be 4:3, and the way the Neo Geo's aspect ratio works, it should kind of fit just right in that. It should be, if it's not, it's close enough where it wouldn't upset even most Neo Geo purists, so I wouldn't worry about the horizontal. The vertical, hopefully they don't do something like try to stretch it. Hopefully there's just black bars and a nice bezel to cover it or something like that, because the resolution scaled 4x vertical is not quite 1024. There's absolutely no mention of what emulation they're using, though, only that there's going to be a scanline option. Also, the control panel has two players, and it's kind of cool that it looks very similar to a Neo Geo in that it has right player, left player start, and a game select button. However, it's like a Street Fighter 6-button style control pad, which immediately gives me pause because I'm like, is this supposed to be an MVS or what? Because MVSs didn't really ever look like that. At least none of the ones in the US did. So I don't know what that's all about. Also, it comes with 50 games, but there's some noticeable ones missing. Like there's no Windjammers, there's no Neo Turf Master. So I don't really know. I'm not. I guess take a look at the list and decide for yourself. Is this something that are your favorite games on here? Do you want a tabletop mini machine, kind of like the one that I did, but without having to do any work on it? It just kind of shows up. It's really up to you if you want it. I reached out to the team, and actually somebody from the fighting game community vouched for me as well, which was really awesome. But I reached out to the team and asked for an interview. They said they're going to try to set something up. I haven't heard back from them in a few days, so hopefully they're just trying to figure out time differences and stuff like that. But I really want to do an interview to figure out exactly what they're doing here, because if it is just like an arcade one-up style, like, hey, here's something that looks like an arcade machine, it's got a bunch of buttons, be happy with it or don't, there's still a lot of people that would want that. For me personally, while I do think this stuff looks cool, if it's going to be a subpar experience in any way, I'd rather not. I'd rather just use a Raspberry Pi or just use the mini MVS that I already built, because it's not about the nostalgia. It's about the games. So like if you have if you loved Neo Geo and, you would love to have a tabletop or a 3/4 full-size stand-up, and, it feels nice to look at and occasionally play, then cool. But I want to know that it actually works right before I tell anybody to invest any money in it. And I would say that to anybody making anything like this. So it's certainly not at all a dig against the team working on it. I'm just trying to be thorough like I always am. So I'm hoping that someday soon I will be following up with an interview with the developers and possibly even get my hands on one to borrow just to test out and then forward on to the next reviewer or something like that. But I hope this is awesome. With so many different ways of recreating consoles these days, from software emulation to full FPGA recreations with cartridge slots working and all that stuff, I really hope that for $500 they would have taken the time to do this. Maybe not perfect, but do it well enough that the very people who stood behind Neo Geo all these years would actually want to play it and not just keep it as a collector's item. So, long rant over. There's nothing other than speculation at this point, other than the specs I already said. So check out the link to the main page if you want all the info that they said about it, and I'll follow up when there's real info on it. EposVox just posted a video about getting started streaming retro games, and I think it's really an awesome way for people to take the first step into it. He uses the Retro Tank as an example, which I think is the perfect device for people getting started, and goes over things like integer scaling, how to set up the basics in OBS. So it's really great for people that maybe are just used to setting your HDMI to 720p or 1080p, and then putting your little window in there and going from there. And you don't ever actually have to worry about scaling or any of that stuff. Or I guess if you did, scaling modern stuff just by stretching a little bit isn't the worst, because smooth scaling doesn't matter as much with newer style games. But I don't know, overall I thought it was great. I still plan on doing my own beginner streaming video. To be honest, I'm pretty much going to be saying almost exactly what Adam already said in this video. I just also wanted to do one from the perspective of somebody that's never even seen OBS before. Whereas your average viewer, or anybody that's even really familiar with the EposVox channel, has definitely seen OBS, whether they've used it or not. At least they know what it is and know what to expect. So I do plan on doing a beginner streaming thing at some point, but I also want to make sure to get a Mac so that I could really, in a couple of capture cards of all price ranges, just so I could give people the basics, because I think it really drives me insane when I hear people say, oh, there's too many streamers. Like, that is the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard in my life, because what if I just have a couple of friends, maybe like 3 or 4 buddies that grew up playing video games, that we miss each other and you can't really hang out in person as easily these days. So what if we just all, take turns doing a stream and get on chat and bullshit with each other and do the usual? Like, you don't need to stream to try to become a professional streamer. You could stream just because you want to hang out with your friends and play a video game that way. So I absolutely encourage anybody to try streaming at all who even wants to just see if they even like it. Even if you get set up for just 1 or 2, depending on what equipment you already own, you might not need that much of an investment. The only other thing I'll add to Adam's video is he talked a lot, or for a bit at least, about what kind of capture cards you might want to use. But if you're the person that just did what I just explained, like you just want to hang out with your buddies, you don't really know if this is going to be a thing that you do more than once every couple of months, Adam did a review on a $20 capture card. I think I'm pretty sure I put the link to that in this video. Yeah, right here. You could get them from eBay or Amazon. They're around $20, and they're meh, but they're $20. So, I actually think they're the perfect thing for people that just want to use, like streamers that want to use a webcam or their camera as a webcam. They're probably not, they're probably a little bit choppy, but whatever. It's still better than your average crappy $20 webcam. If you already own the camera, whatever. I also did some captures with the Retro Tank in 480p, and they were all right. But it's $20. So, definitely perspective here. So I'll eventually get to my super, super beginner video on this. But honestly, I would most of it would just be referencing EposVox's stuff anyway. So if you're looking to get started, or especially if you've already done any kind of streaming but want to switch over to doing retro stuff, definitely check out this video. And he said it's going to be the first in a series of videos. So, I'll be covering those as well when they come through. And we'll see what happens with the rest of them, but I certainly enjoyed this one, and I'm looking forward to see his tips on the rest. A Kickstarter for the ZX Spectrum Next just got funded and raised over $1 million pretty much right away. So this is an FPGA recreation of the ZX Spectrum, and I was told I have to say Z because it was never released in North America, so say it like it was said where it was released. I don't want to have my European friends smack me down for that. But it's basically just a near perfect recreation of the original that also has a bunch of extra features. So, modern stuff like Wi-Fi, faster processors, RGB SCART, VGA, and HDMI video outputs, which is really cool because then you could do everything from the spectrum across the spectrum of playing it on an original style monitor to any VGA monitor you find to just HDMI like you would normally expect. There's a full set of specs that all look like they're pretty beefy for something like this. And this really is obviously for somebody that wants an exact recreation of the original. I've been seeing Sorg Alexi doing a bunch of updates on the ZX Spectrum FPGA core for the Mister. So, if you just want to experience this using hardware emulation, then the Mister might actually be a more cost-effective way to do that. But if you're looking for a perfect recreation or a near perfect recreation, the look and the feel, the keyboard, something that makes you feel like you're actually using the original, this is probably a better way to go. And I genuinely think that there is a place for both. There is a place for the Mister, for all of the amazing things that it does, and there's also a place for individual consoles to be made like this to give you that look and feel, as well as just being able to use the software on it. So anybody's interested, there's a bunch of different tiers. You could buy one or two at the same time. I think they're like $400 each, so they're fairly expensive, but read through the Kickstarter and really see if this is something that, if you're a fan of the computer, maybe this is something that's important to you. And also, I believe that this is the second run that they've done, and their first Kickstarter was successful and people were mostly happy with it. So, while I'm always a little hesitant to back Kickstarters these days, which sucks, I know that's a negative thing to say, but I think we've all gotten burned a few times. This is a company that's already done this before and had pretty much positive responses. So, before you throw your $400 out there, it's nice to know that at least this is something they already have experience in. But any fans of the computer, definitely check it out and see if it's for you. It looks like Marshall's working on an updated hardware revision of the UltraHDMI, and it looks like the biggest difference is going to be an optional add-on board that gets analog video output from the same HDMI board, which would really come in handy for a few different reasons. First of all, it appears that all of the extra features and on-screen display are going to be visible through the RGB output as well. So that means that you could have things like deblur options and all of those advanced features through both the analog and the digital ports, which is pretty awesome. There's going to be RGB and component video output that would solder to the RGB pins of the multi-out, but not mess with the rest of them. So it doesn't take away your composite or S-video output. It just adds either RGB or component. On the installation side, if you had one of the original N64s that's compatible with just that very easy drop-in RGB mod, just solder 4 wires, drop the board over the pins, and you're done. That was already pretty easy. But most of the N64s out there aren't that model revision, which means it would be a very complicated and expensive install to have both mods, because you would need the more expensive boards and you would need to solder them both either manually, which has been done. Dan did that for me a few years ago, or I believe Bordy created a ribbon cable that makes it easier to install both. But it's still a lot more expensive to do all that and a lot harder. So simplifying everything all in one like this is pretty awesome. The only downside, though, is it's a completely different ribbon cable, which means if you've already installed one of these, you can't just take out the piece of hardware, unplug the ribbon cable, plug the new hardware in, and be done. You would have to reinstall the whole thing. And while I'm definitely not a pro modder, I don't know how good an idea it would be to try to uninstall this flex cable and reinstall it in another N64. Pro modders might think that's not too big a deal. And while I've installed plenty of these Ultra HDMIs that are all still running, I don't know if I'd be comfortable doing that. Unless you're, I think the only two real choices would be to uninstall it, buy a new flex cable for the original, and throw out the other one to be safe and install a new one. Or probably the better move would be to just buy another N64 for this and sell off your original, if this feature was important enough to you to upgrade for. I don't know if it would be for most people. So now all of this stuff, while Alex did an awesome job hunting down all this info, all of this is kind of still just hearsay, because I don't know if anybody's got any official word from Marshall, who's notoriously hard to get a hold of. I've talked to him a few times. He's always super nice, but it's almost impossible to get a response from him anywhere. So it looks like it's going to be about $130 plus an extra $30 for if you want the RGB board. It looks like the OSD and all features should be available through the RGB port as well. And it also appears that the RGB or component video would only be original resolutions, which makes sense, because if you need analog 480p output, just use the HDMI output and buy yourself a super cheap converter. You don't need you don't need any kind of RGB for that. And the only other thing is there's no official word right now on where you could get these. So for a while you were able to get them from Game Tech, and then just these group buys on shmups that people were doing, but there's no official distributor. There's no, it's just they're impossible to find, for a lack of a better word. So hopefully someday Marshall would work with somebody to get these things produced in larger quantities, get them out to multiple resellers, or just one reseller, but have them in stock all the time, because they're notoriously hard to find. And all it does is it ends up with people scalping these on eBay for an insane amount of money. And, it also ends up in people trying to clone it. There was somebody just the other day bragging about trying to clone it. And I'm pretty sure I know what notorious clone company they work for, too. So I'll just, that's why if anybody saw my Twitter feed a week or two ago, I tweeted at what I think is Marshall's account. Might not have even been him, but I kind of warned him, like, hey, people are starting to clone it. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope the opposite happens. I hope he's able to just make a couple of thousands of these, get these in the hands of the right installers and resellers, and kind of squash that problem altogether. Because if they're readily available, generally speaking, it's not going to get cloned. There's, it doesn't happen nearly as much as stuff that you can't get. So now there's a demand. So I guess my rant over. No disrespect towards Marshall. He's always been nice to me the few times I have talked to him, but I wish he had some way to communicate with people that was better than what he's been doing. So Jimmy Hoppa just teamed up with Rewind Mike to do a video about the MSX game Aliens, which is based off of the movie, the sequel to the original Alien movie. And I just thought it was an awesome video that most retro nerds would probably enjoy. There's tie-ins between the movie and the game, and Rewind Mike's part of the video showed the previously unreleased and unfinished Famicom Disk System port of the same game. And it was really cool to see the two different versions of the game, and really just kind of go through something fun and retro. And I thought it had all the aspects that most people would enjoy. And as Jimmy does very often, it ties in the developers who made it, as well as their previous and follow-up work and stuff like that. And I'll be honest, like I hesitated to write a post about this on RetroRGB, because I was like, man, I like a lot of stuff that I don't post. Like I really liked the new John Petrucci song, but I'm not going to write a post on RetroRGB. And I'm like going back and forth, like, do I not write a post because Jimmy's my friend and it's going to feel like favoritism? Or, I really had like an internal debate about this, but a couple of days went by, or maybe just over a full day, and I couldn't stop talking about it. All of my fellow nerds that like this stuff, I kept mentioning the video and like referencing different parts of it. And then I just kind of figured, like, look, I don't really care who made that video. If I talked about it that much, I would want to share it on the site. So, I'm always interested in people's thoughts about that. There have been a few people that did kind of express their discontent with how very often I feature videos from channels I work with or I'm friends with or whatever. But, I also don't write up every one of my friends' videos, and I also have other opinions. I've written up friends' videos before that I disagreed with, but I still thought we're 100% relevant to the people watching. So, as always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about this, but I couldn't stop talking about this one, so I figured I would share it because I assumed everybody would probably enjoy it. Here's one that's pretty cool that I didn't fully understand when I first saw it. So even if you think you know what this is, give me a moment here. Somebody just wrote their own game engine for the Super Nintendo that allowed them to port over Sonic the Hedgehog from the Sega Genesis, or at least one level, Green Hill Zone 3, I believe. And the purpose of this was twofold. They wanted to have a game engine where you could have a game that feels exactly the same as Sonic. So that fast movement, the very cool graphics and that. But also the purpose was to test it out so that they could make their own game. And they just felt like doing one on, doing a Sonic level would be a great way to port this over. So I actually saw this right when it came out. And I must have been grumpy or something because I kind of passed right over it and assumed it was one of those ROM hacks that just takes Super Mario World and puts Sonic the Hedgehog graphics in it. And I've played those before, and those are neat. I don't want to take away from those, but you're playing Super Mario World with, slightly different game mechanics. But this is not that at all. This is a from-scratch written engine that gives you the real feel of Sonic the Hedgehog, but on Super Nintendo. So I thought it was awesome. I started to do a write-up on it, and then just as I sat down to write it, I opened up my computer and saw that John Linneman from DF Retro just did a video on it, which was way better than the one I was going to do. So I figured, perfect, I'll just do a write-up about his video instead and just point everybody his way. But it was really impressive to see. It is playable if you would like to play it, and it even works on real hardware. So if you just pick up any one of the Super Nintendo ROM carts, it should work fine. And once again, it's only one level and there's no boss, but it's just a really fun way to see what could have been. And in the video, John really speculated, like, what would have this been like when the original 16-bit console wars were happening, if somebody actually put a fully feels the same port of Sonic on the Super Nintendo? Would that have, how would that have changed the game? And well, that's certainly fun to speculate. One thing that does not need speculation is how cool it is that somebody built that engine. So if you're into this stuff, check out the video and also the original thread that describes everything that went on. And of course, once again, you could download the ROM for yourself if you want to try it. Professor Abrasive just announced the price and availability of the Satiator optical drive emulator, and it's $260. It should be available to Patreon subscribers within about a week at a $15 discount, so $245. And then the next batch of 1,000 will be put on sale shortly afterwards. So that's really expensive. And I do realize that it's complicated to do all this stuff. It costs money to have them properly manufactured and tested and all that. But I'm really wondering what price is going to do to the sales of this thing, because just my opinion, just my speculation, I think if it was $199, that batch of 1,000 would probably have sold out immediately. And heck, if it was cheaper than that, if it was $125 or something, I don't think you'd be able to keep these in stock at all. I think, you'd have to make them in very large numbers for everybody to be able to get them. But that price, that high a price, that's really going to draw a line. You could get, if your Saturn is compatible, or even if it's not, you could buy a brand, a newer Sega Saturn, used obviously, but you could buy another one from a game store that has the 20-pin drive, and then you could get yourself the Fenrir and an SD card, and probably have somebody recap the Saturn for the same price or less than just the Satiator. So that's going to be really tough to decide what you want. I'm still buying one just because, as somebody who reviews stuff and runs tests, to have a Saturn that's already been refurbished that has both an optical drive and a way to play just off of an SD card is going to be really helpful to me. And I guess it would also, if you've already had a Saturn, like let's say you took your Saturn, you put a new laser in it, you had the whole thing recapped, you had the laser tuned, you had maybe the SPIDIF mod done, you did the FRAM mod, maybe you even did the BIOS mod if you needed that to be done. That's a lot of money invested in that Saturn. So I guess in that case, yeah, buying this would probably make sense, especially if you need disk support or if it wasn't a 20-pin drive, because I don't think there's any word on when or if the different versions of the Fenrir are going to be released that have compatibility with all of them. So yeah, this is a weird one here. I don't know what that price point's going to do to the sales of this, but maybe it's necessary. So I don't know. I certainly don't want to speculate on how much it costs to make these. I'm just glad, I guess, they're finally out. But I used the picture of the box that Professor Abrasive came up with, and I thought it was really neat when he announced that, and now all I could think of is, how much is that box adding to the price of this? Is it only a couple bucks, or are we now pushing the limit of what we're spending on this to get extras like that? So, and just a couple more details. If you are or were a Patreon subscriber, you're going to be getting an email, and you'll have 5 days to purchase before you lose your place in line. So there will be no rushing to the website, hitting F5 a million times, crashing the website, at least for Patreon subscribers. And when you do log in, the web link will be available, and it'll say like $10,000 price. But when you get the code that's emailed to you, it'll drop down to the proper price. And no, you won't be able to check out if you're mega rich and have 10 grand to spend on one of these. And I guess afterwards, then they're all just going to go up for sale. And that's probably when you're going to expect a bum rush. And there's no official date on that yet, but I'll let everybody know. So while this is very cool to finally have a product I've been waiting for quite a many years, the price was a bit of a shocker for a lot of people. So now I'm kind of wondering, will those 1,000 sell out immediately like they definitely would have if it was much cheaper? Or will they be kind of easier to get as a result? But I don't know. At least there's options now. I mean, that price of the mode is just starting to look a lot cheaper. You can get a mode and a 3D printed bracket and a really cheap SSD for the same price as probably just the Satiator and and shipping. So definitely choices to be made depending on what your preferred method of playing your games are. So I'll have more info posted as soon as there is any. Mike Chi just released a new RetroTink product called the 2X Pro Multi-Format, or Tink M like I've been calling it. And unfortunately, as I kind of feared, it confused a lot of people. So I'll give you the quick rundown here. And then if it sounds like a product that you want more info on, or that you'd be interested in buying, please check out the video and also read through the post, because I elaborated on a lot of stuff that I didn't feel needed to be focused on in the video, but was info that I really thought should be out there too. But for now, I'll just give you as quick a run through as I can, and then go watch the video if you think it's for you. But essentially, it's very similar to the Pro that was just released a few months ago, that could pass through 480p video with a bit of color compression on it. No compression on anything else though, just 480p. And it scales the video slightly different using bilinear scaling. So what does that mean for people that want to use this? If you have retro consoles in the mix, so 5th gen and earlier, so we're talking anything that's not the PlayStation 2, Xbox, Wii, or GameCube, anything before that, I would just stick with the original RetroTink, and then whenever you use games with 3D graphics, flip on that smoothing filter and see how you like it. I love the filter on 3D graphics and hate it on 2D graphics, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever your eyes prefer. However, this product has a couple of very specific niche uses to it. Niche, however you say it. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I think the perfect use for it is the PlayStation 2, because the PlayStation 2's library is mostly 480i, and while yes, I know you could install a mod chip and force different resolutions, not only does that require installing a mod chip, but I've had really spotty results with that. So assuming that you're going to have to play the games in their original resolution, having bilinear scaling and zero lag scale deinterlacing of this is an awesome help. I think also there's some field shift modes that, depending on the game, might help with the interlace flicker. Once again, just try it and see on yours. But I think overall, it's just a great fit for the PlayStation 2's graphics. And of course, will also work with the PlayStation 1 as well. It adds scan lines too, so that's kind of cool. Not in 480p mode. And the fact that it passes through the games on the PlayStation that also offer 480p is an awesome bonus. Now, the way that this had to be made, the limitation was that it had to compress the colors to 422 in 480p, not in any other resolution. So as a pass-through device, that technically means you might get a better picture just getting a cheap converter. However, it's my opinion, which some people get really mad when I say this, but you're either a person that could immediately see color compression, or you'll probably never see it, and I think the majority of people would never notice. That really upsets the people that do notice whenever I say that, but I'm just giving my opinion based on the people I've spoken to. So in the context of the PlayStation 2, there's so much trade-off on this that it's so worth, in my opinion at least, if that's your favorite console, it's worth picking one of these up. And oh, by the way, if you also have an Xbox and a Wii and a Dreamcast when the HD Retrovision cables come out, you could use it for that too. But if you only used those other consoles and not the PS2, I would probably suggest just getting a very basic analog to digital converter. It won't compress the colors, it'll pass everything through. And the other point too that I made in the video that I'm kind of just stumbling across now is a lot of newer TVs have different lag through their analog video inputs than they do through their HDMI. I have no idea why. It should be an easy analog to digital conversion. And I tested on my TV, and I don't know if this acted different before or after a firmware update. So there's info in the video about that. So my only point is that putting your analog games through a proper scaler, and especially when 480i or any interlaced signals in the mix, is always a good idea. That way you could reduce a lot of lag, or at least potential for lag. So overall, it was good for that. One other kind of neat bonus is that it has a really good comb filter in it on the composite video input. And that if you're using any console pretty much with composite video, even though it's bilinear scaling, composite's so noisy you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference, and the comb filter's better. So that's kind of something to think about. Maybe your two favorite consoles are the original NES and the PlayStation 2, and then cool. But for the most part, I would still strongly recommend getting the original Tink for pretty much everything else. The only other neat feature too is the comb filter works even in pass-through mode, which means if you're somebody that wants to take VHS tapes or laser discs and capture them, and you have a capture card compatible with 480i, you could use the Tink in pass-through mode and get a really good comb filter on composite video and digitize that. So another cool bonus. But respectfully, I don't mean anything negative towards the product, and certainly nothing negative towards Mike Chi. It's my opinion that the Tink M is really like the Tink PlayStation 2, pretty much. Get yourself HD Retrovision cables, the good shielded ones. I have links to them right here just because, if you own a PS2, you pretty much should own those anyway. And I guess that's pretty much it. So a lot of people were so confused, like, oh, I just bought the Pro. Now I wish I got the 480p version, but my favorite console is Super Nintendo. And I think there was so much confusion to that. I thought I did a good enough job explaining it. I guess not. Or maybe people were just playing Nintendo Switch, sending text messages and watching the video all at the same time and only half paying attention. Who knows? I think that's kind of how people watch videos these days, which is a bit frustrating. But so yeah, if my not so quick rundown sparked your interest in this, watch the video and check out the post. If not, I apologize for boring you. I was just trying to get good info out there to point people in the right direction of which retro Tink product would be the choice for them, if any, I guess, because there are some really good choices now. OSSC, Rad2X, it's based on retro Tink technology, and of course the OSSC Pro is coming at some point soon too. So lots of awesome choices now. If you understand what the Tink M is, it's a great choice. If not, it might just confuse you. So if there's any question, just stick with the originals. The Behar brothers have just announced a new supergun called the Shogun that's designed specifically for both types of Neo Geo boards. So for people unaware, there are actually two different pinouts in Neo Geo motherboards. The later editions used pretty much JAMA, so you could just plug that into any JAMA harness, whereas some of the earlier revisions used mostly JAMA, but a few pins were different due to stereo audio and a few other things. So this supergun's actually compatible with both. You could use it with either one. It has a SCART output, and that's fully attenuated, so you don't have to worry about overvoltage on any of the lines. And while it might be usable with other arcade boards, it's really designed for the exact voltages of Neo Geo, which totally makes sense. It's also only $75, which is a pretty good price for somebody that's just looking to connect their Neo Geo board to their RGB setup like this. So overall, it seems to be a pretty cool option. I know there was a few different people working on Neo Geo, whether it's superguns or different things for it. And I don't know what happened. I think all the projects stalled. I don't know if everything going on in the world was added to all of that. But as far as I knew, last time, this year, there should have been like 3 of these boards out by now. So I'm glad that the Behar brothers were able to get to theirs. They also have the VGA 16 and their upcoming consoleized MVS that they're selling as well. So they have some pretty cool products coming out for Neo Geo boards. But it looks like if you're somebody that just wants one dedicated supergun to your Neo Geo, this is a great option now. It's got the DB15 connectors on there, and I'm assuming it's the same pinout as all Neo Geos, so you could use original sticks or any kind of handmade arcade sticks on there. And it also looks like it has a THS 7374 chip, which means you do get that low pass filter if you're doing any kind of direct capture or stuff like that, which is always handy. So, overall, it looks like a pretty good option. I'll probably borrow one to test when it comes in, and I do hope those other projects still continue. Not that there's anything I don't like about this. I just always like that there's options, and there could be 2 products that are almost identical to each other, but one's kind of a better fit for your setup and the other one's kind of a better fit for somebody else's setup. So hopefully we'll still be able to get all those different options. But it's really awesome to see the Behar brothers put this out here, and thanks to Ronnie for doing such a detailed write-up and getting everybody the info on it. It looks like someone's making reproduction carrying cases for the Virtual Boy at $185. So I wanted to drop the price first because I know that's really expensive, but the project itself looks really cool. It looks like they're trying to recreate the Blockbuster video carrying cases for the Virtual Boy, but use really high quality parts in it, like a high quality durable case, and the foam that's inside is really meant to last a long time and not get that foam dust that you sometimes get. Anybody that's ever used any kind of like custom cases or stuff like that with the foam inserts know exactly what I'm talking about. And they do come all pre-cut, which is kind of a big deal if you've worked with custom cases before. If not, it doesn't make any sense, and you're like, why would you care? But there was one company in Long Island that used to make really great guitar cases, but they would not pre-cut them for you. You'd have to cut them yourself. And I actually went down there. I was like, look, what is it going to cost? Here's my guitar. Cut it for my guitar. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but I've done that before. And, you know, when you're trying to cut the foam out to shape whatever it is that you're doing, and it's a little too much cut, now whatever it is that you're holding is flopping around in there. So I wasn't about to have my guitar bouncing around inside a case. So I just wanted to mention that. So they come completely finished. You know, you open them up, you put your Virtual Boy in, and it also fits the controller, the stand, a power supply, and a couple of games. Hopefully there's room in there for link cables and extension cables as well, because I know I certainly just bought a couple of those from Kevin. Overall, though, it looks pretty cool. It just, you know, I would never imagine something like this to be cheap, and it's cheaper than trying to find one of the original Blockbuster ones, but it is very expensive. And this is one of the things that I would really like. I'm not sure if I would spend that much on it, but hey, if you're a giant Virtual Boy fan, you don't want yours collecting dust, or you carry yours around and you've already spent a lot of money on it. Maybe you put the virtual taps in it or something. I guess it would make sense to have a good way to protect it. But the same person that makes these makes a bunch of others, like cart cases and even things like I believe there's a case for the Vectrix in there, or there was no pictures, but there was one listed. So I'd love to see more of this person's work. Anybody's interested, just go to their DeviantArt page, and then they have links right there on where to purchase them. So kind of an interesting thing. Certainly one of these things that everybody I think that owns a Virtual Boy would be interested in, just not interested in spending that much money on it, I guess. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much to everybody that watches and listens and plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to everybody that supports on services like Floatplane and Patreon, as it's your support that keeps this podcast, all the behind-the-scenes research, and all the other craziness going. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week.